for the interactive part of the show, of the event. I'm a bit off by this strange start. I don't usually call my radio show. It's not a show. It's an event, and it's definitely not a program. It's a deprogram. It's attempt to deprogram. Because we have been programmed on all fronts, from all sides, and it keeps going on from birth till death. It's a part of the ongoing war against all of humanity. Not one people waging war against another people, that's also part of it. But there is a bigger war going on. And we are the target. And the trivium is important in that sense that we have not been taught the trivium and the quadrivium. For if we were taught this method, then we would not have been fooled as we have been in the past. I was fooled in the past also. It took an enormous event to make me start researching things on my own, which led to more research. And I found, looking back now, that before that time, I was a zombie, okay? And I was what you would call asleep. And I am now getting over the stage that I am not so mad anymore. I mean, how dare they fool me for over 35 years? Okay? You don't do that to me. That's not acceptable. I don't like it when people fool me. So when you find out that you've been fooled about everything, it's not a nice experience. So you have to go through that, and you will get mad because you were fooled for so long. But if you are at that stage, there is light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. For the first time, you're actually starting to become alive. That's why I use the word zombie and sleep and awake. Because knowledge awakes you. That goes on a spiritual level as well as a non-spiritual level. And so the trivium links to knowledge. And in the second hour, we will be discussing this with Bob Tuskin. And before, in the first hour, I was hoping to get into some mythology. But you can also call in if you like. The number is 716-213-6816. And the interactive part in the chat room, as I said, you can ask questions and that I may be able to answer. Doesn't matter what topic. You can ask questions about anything. If you want to know anything especially about Holland, for instance, or, I'm Dutch, so I should know. Okay, so off to mythology. Last time we were discussing mythology, we were at the point of stones and rocks and what symbols they have. And we found out that there is also a sexual aspect to it. Especially in India, you see that there are all kinds of lingams, as they call them, sticking out of the ground. These are phalluses. Those are also rocks. A rock also is a Masonic term, as is a stone. Now, that is not too hard to imagine that those two are Masonic terms. So, here we go. Conical stones, which apparently serve as idols, have been found at Golgi in Cyprus. A white, upright, conical stone. You see the upright. There's your sexual link. A white upright conical stone was a symbol of Aphrodite at Paphos. Square stones, square is also a Masonic term. Square you will also find in the Trivium, like square root, things like that. Square stones were used by the Greek and Arabians as a symbol of Venus. At Paiga in Pamphylia, a conical stone was the emblem of Astarte. Diana of the Ephesians was represented by a stone. In 204 BC, during the war with Hannibal, the Romans took from Pessinus to Rome to a larger black stone, sacred to Cybele, and worshipped it with great ceremony. Okay. And let's see. We've got a caller coming in. Jeff from Massachusetts, what can I do for you?
Well, you were talking about people being fooled and not liking it, and I think I'm going to branch off from what you said about people not liking to be fooled, and I think that's why people don't really want to know what's really going on, because people are like, look, I don't want to hear that I'm getting screwed. It's depressing. I don't want to hear that I'm getting shafted and having money taken out of my paycheck and sent to God knows what. I don't even want to know where the politicians send my money.
We still have Jeff on the line, and you were talking about the people not really wanting to know what's going on. Continue, please, Jeff.
Exactly, and basically, it's the government can do whatever they want to do as long as they leave me alone, as long as I'm able to walk down the street, and so forth. I don't want to know what's going on. I work 2 or 3 different jobs, and I have a family I got to raise. I got to put a son through college, and this is the mindset of people. Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of people live out in the suburbs where they have to pay exorbitant amount of taxes and so forth. Mm-hmm. So when people vote, they vote for the wallet. I mean, it doesn't matter if the guy's got horns and a tail. Basically, you talk to a lot of people. It's who cares if Obama's a Muslim? Who cares if he was born in Kenya? I mean, Obama's going to get me what I need. I'm on unemployment, and Obama's going to increase my unemployment. That's all I care about. The guy can have horns, a tail, and a pitchfork, and as long as he leaves me alone, and so forth, and all this stuff is nothing but right-wing pluck. This crazy stuff. And people really think this way. It's really sad. There's a movie out called Idiocracy. I mean, I do recommend people to watch it because it is predictive programming along with other movies and so forth. And if you look at it as predictive programming and you don't get a lobotomy from it, a movie like that, you can definitely see where the world. You can definitely see where America's heading towards. We are being dumbed down like sheep and guinea pigs. But anyways, I thank you for having me on the broadcast, and do have a great day.
Yeah, Jeff, thank you for the call. Take care. Yeah, not only are the people voting as they think would be best for them, but if you think that, for instance, Obama would be good for you, you vote for him, but it doesn't really matter what you vote for. I'm also doing... besides this one, on mythology, I'm reading from Carol Quigley, Tragedy and Hope. And this Professor Carol Quigley explains how the CFR, which last week I said the CFR came around the 1900s. I believe it was 1919 that the CFR was created. Not here. I put myself in the United States so often, not here in the Netherlands, but in the United States. And that they have had a major influence in who's going to become president, no matter if he was a Democrat or a Republican. And now we have a European Council on Foreign Relations as well, the ECFR. And there are many, 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 many more groups like that. Council on National Policy, or Council for National Policy, not sure if it's 1 or 4, is another one of them. They are front groups. I would call them think tanks. They are working together with other non-governmental organizations to build this world governance, better way of saying that. So it doesn't even matter if he voted for Obama or another candidate. It's the same here in the Netherlands, by the way. We have many political parties. It's so much you can't see the trees through the wood anymore. And a lot of people are wondering what's the difference between all of these parties. And, well, there isn't much, to be honest. Lots of... in the past, we had this middle path kind of idea in politics. Not too far to the left, not too far to the right. And that's how it's been going along here in the Netherlands. The Netherlands as a country has been protected. You can't tell me that the 14 that was I was born 14 million, and now we are around 17 million people. Okay, that those people have so much of an influence that they belong at the place 16 or something when it comes to your economic place on the charts, you know. China number 1, America number 2, India number 3, something like that. And the Netherlands, which is a very small country, has always managed to stay very up high there on the economic ladder. Now that doesn't make any sense. None at all. Especially if you look in last decades, say 40 years back or something, when India was living in poverty, as they still are today. But just look at it. Those are 1 billion people. How come they were not already then above the Netherlands when it comes to being able to produce goods and create wealth? You see? It doesn't make any sense. So we here in Europe are more or less protected by an unseen hand. And this hand has also been across the United States, but now it's leaving there. And it's also leaving here in the Netherlands and the rest of Europe, but not so fast that all of a sudden there is a chaos breaking out. It's an incremental breakdown. Okay, let's see if I can continue this symbols, and I hope I'm going to hear the next break. I hope the ads didn't catch Jeff and me, because I couldn't hear the break coming in very cool, but that we will see. So where was I? Diana of the Ephesians was represented by a stone. In 204 before Christ, during the war with Hannibal, the Romans took from Pessinus to Rome a large black stone sacred to Cybele and worshipped it with great ceremony. Chemos of the Moabites was worshipped in the form of a black conical stone. To the Nabatean Arabs of Syria, a large stone was a symbol of the god Dusares and the great mother Allah. Okay. So Idas, a Greek writer, says that Dusares, which worshipped in the form of a black stone, was 4 feet high, which stood as a gold base. Square blocks of stone seem to have formed an intermediate stage between rough, unhewn stones and realistic carved statues. Continuing here. In Greece, there was a square image of Zeus Teleos. During the dominance of Greek religion, in a rectangular cella constituted the central part of the Greek temple. The temple was somewhat extended at the front and and back with additional chambers, or surrounded by single or double rows of columns. The Holy of Holies in Solomon's temple was constructed in the form of a cube. Okay, so you see here there are pillars with these Greek churches, temples. A funny thing, this is a real joke, a Dutch joke, and this is how they play. This is an inside joke, so to speak. When we're talking about pillars here all the time, right? In Dutch, it's not much different. We say pilar, but the first, when you speak the word pilar, you're actually saying Velus, because the first 4 letters is another word for Velus. So there you go. That's how they made our language. Continuing, the lars and penates, which Romans kept as household fetishes, were small stone images representing male and female figures. The Latin word penates suggests that the images were of phallic significance. Nah, no kidding. I mean, how easy is it to make penis from penates? Huh? The Persian god Mithra was thought to have been born of a rock, to have married a rock, and to have been parent of a rock. Before the rise of Mohammedanism, Byzantine writers regarded the worship of Aphrodite as the principal cult of Mecca. The idol of the goddess was a white stone, and that of her son was the small black stone, now in the holy Mohammedan Kaaba. The dual character of the creative forces, which were thought to be responsible for life on earth, was symbolized by pillars, obelisks, columns, and similar forms. Okay, so here is an idea that is being brought forth, which has to do with a lot of mythological stories. They talk about creative forces, and they are thought to be, says here, responsible for life on Earth. And these creative forces are then symbolized by pillars, obelisks, columns, and similar forms. So what you should understand here is that these forms are the exoteric. They are the outside, the materialized form of what is unseen, of what is unknown. Because we don't know what is life exactly. It's not done yet in a laboratorium that they mix the different amino acids and then zap it and poof, you got life. No, it doesn't work like that. So life has its own, I should say life seems to have its own way of expressing itself in this universe. And the different forms that are used are also part of the trivium. They come back in mathematics, Pythagorean mathematics. But that's all, I'm just scratching on the surface of all that. So let's continue here. During the time of Hosea, pillars were an important feature of religion, and the prophet thought that ephods, pillars, and teraphim are images, were essential to proper worship. Pillars representing the male and female principles were to be found at temples throughout the East. They were not incorporated in the structure, but stood in front of the entrance. The columns forming a symbolic gateway or door of life. There were 2 such pillars in front of the temple of Heracles at Gades. A pair of pillars stood in front of the oracle at Dodana, and pillars flanked the approach to the entrance of most temples in Egypt. Pillars typified life, strength, and protection in the same manner as the linga and yoni in India. The 2 pillars, Joachim and Boaz, which stood before the Temple of Solomon, had male and female names, and doubtless had the same significance as such symbols elsewhere. In India, they got the linga or lingam, which is the male part, and the yoni, which is the female part. In addition to the pillars placed at the entrances of the temples, single pillars and towers, which are thought to be of phallic origin, are still to be found in many parts of the world. In Ireland, there are many towers of this type. Usually, they were not erected on top of hills, as would be expected if they were intended as watchtowers, nor were they usable as fortresses. It is widely believed, therefore, that they were merely phallic monuments. These towers vary in height from 50 to 150 feet and are from 12 to 20 feet in diameter at the base. Well, that's big. Menhirs reminds me of menhirs. You guys ever read Asterix and Obelix? Yeah. They are empty inside, and most of them are divided into 3 to 8 lofts of stories by rests of projecting stones. Excuse me, empty inside? What do they mean by that? This is from Round Towers of Ireland by H. O'Brien, pages 1511 to 115, about those empty inside stones. Empty inside towers, I guess. So towers, they can also be seen as pillars. Large stones, which stood alone or at a distance from any rocky formation, seem to have excited the curiosity of the people in early times as they do even today. And in many places they became meeting places where councils, festivals, and religious rites were held. In time, legends were created about them. No, I read that wrong. In time, legends were created about them, and they often acquired a sacred or a semi-sacred significance. There is, by the way, a movie out there. Jeff mentioned Idiocracy. I don't like that movie. I'm going to continue here where we left off before the break. Most stone monuments, however, were transported to their final sites and erected for specific purposes. The most common of the monuments begin single, huge, upright, or slanting stone slabs called menhirs, long stones. In many instances, the menhirs were surrounded by ovals or circles of stones, thus forming the familiar pillar and circle symbol of the male and female. They are called dolmens, from Breton dol, a table, and Welsh men, a stone. A stone table. Oh, we got here a stone table just across, well, not across the street, but in American terms, it would be across the street. They call it stone table. I should visit there sometimes and go look at it. Some of them have peculiar mystic designs scratched or carved on them. Yeah, that's why I should go look at them. The greatest number of menhirs are found in France, where there are between 3,000 and 4,000. Around such monuments, gatherings of various kinds were held, which featured singing, dancing, and kissing. So is that where the term French kiss comes from or something? In French and neighboring countries, phallic virtues were attributed to menhirs by popular superstition, and maids desiring marriage, and wives desiring children rubbed themselves against a rock to ensure fertility. Husbands sometimes took part in the ceremony. By the way, to come back a little bit about the movies that I mentioned, there's this movie, 2001, Space Odyssey. And there's also a stone in there that plays an important role. Stone is one of the most used symbols that I come across. Funny thing again, when you translate it into Dutch, you get steen. Okay, so the first two letters are the same. It's ST. What comes after that is in English is one. Okay, so you got ST1, but in Dutch it's the same. You got ST, één, which is one. So that's the same. I like to play with words. Sometimes you find things through that. Okay, so let's see. We were here. The most celebrated menhirs in the world are found in the vicinity of Karnak in Brittany. They consist of several series, each of which is composed of from 4 to 13 rows or avenues of upright stones called alignments. Alignments, that sounds like a heavenly term, star alignments. They are thought to have originally formed one continuous avenue nearly 2 miles in length. Single menhirs and dolmens are also found in Morocco, Algeria, Spain, Portugal, Great Britain, Holland, Western Germany, Crimea, Arabia, Persia, India, and other parts of Asia, as well as in Australia and Peru. They never told me about those stones in Holland. Not phallic ones. They told me about the hunebedden, for instance. Those are like stone circles. And it's pretty much unknown. They told me it was unknown what it was used for. Let's continue here. Today the word kromleg denotes merely a leaning stone, but originally it signified a stone containing either a natural or a man-made hole or aperture. It also denoted a group of stones placed close to each other and enclosing an area sufficiently small and narrow to be roofed over by one or more capstones. Yeah, this is that's what the hunebedden could also be. Thus forming a root chamber. Yes. This chamber was sometimes partially or wholly embedded in a mound of earth or stones, presenting to outward appearances the form of a tumulus of Charon. Tumulus of Charon? What the heck is that? In rare instances, cromlegs consisted of 2 single standing stones supporting a third and forming a passageway or door of life, so that persons seeking purification could pass through and be regenerated. That is also what the hunebedden could be. The Gaelic word clachan or Klegan, or Kletchan, I don't know how to pronounce that, Clachan, denotes either a church, a stone, or a sacred meeting place. When villages and churchyards were built around sacred stones, they too were called klachans, or klachans. Sounds, what's that strange language they use in Star Trek again? Klingon, sounds Klingon. An Irish expression for going to church also signifies going to the stone. Aha. And in northern Scotland, the word clachan is still used for house of God. In 567 AD, the Council Board of Tours in France felt obliged to issue a decree against the worship of upright stones. So there they started removing as much as they could of these hints to sexual engagements. It's just because they want to do this in secrecy, as you will notice about the Catholic Church and all their sex scandals coming out. So, they decided to issue a decree against the worship of upright stones, and in the 5th and 7th century similar warnings were issued from Canterbury. In the British Isles there are ruins of more than 200 monuments formed by circles of stone, the best known of them being the Great Monument of Stonehenge on Salisbury Plain, which is believed by some authorities to have been erected in the Stone Age. Probably about 2000 or 1800 BC, Stonehenge originally consisted of an outer circle 300 feet in the diameter and an inner circle of 106 feet in diameter, inside of which there was another series of smaller stones in the form of a horseshoe. One thing about the word authorities here, when somebody writes a book, for instance, they also call it an author. This is taken by your subconscious, and you are leaning towards accepting whatever authorities tell you to. So be aware of that and question everything. You should start to think for yourself instead of what you hear from me or any other radio host. And if you still have a TV in the house, get rid of it, sell it, and end the subscription, so you save yourself some money.
All long distance and cell phone charges apply. Powered by UpSnap.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret procedures.
But we're going to go live in a few.
Okay, I'm standing by.
I think a new world order is emerging.
An inside job? How dare you? How dare you?
To create, so to say, mass-produced models of human beings arranged in some kind of a scientific caste system.
We shall go on to the end. We shall fight with growing confidence and growing strength in the air. We shall never surrender.
No, we won't. And this is micro1650am.com. You're listening to Orion Talk Radio. I'm your host, Walter. And we have a guest today. His website is bobtuskin.com. BOBTUSKIN.com. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Hey, thanks so much, Walter. Glad to be here.
Would you like to give a short introduction, name a YouTube channel of yourself?
Well, we have, of course, the official Intel Hub YouTube channel, which I work with very closely. I formerly did the Intel Hub radio show with the guys and have always been working behind the scenes with them. So we have our YouTube channel that we all work on. So it's a team effort. It's at Not For Sale 2, the number 2 NWO, Not For Sale 2, number 2 NWO. And we post all sorts of things. We have the footage of the Adam Kokesh and other activists at the Jefferson Memorial dancing themselves to being arrested. That. Yeah, what kind of shocking stuff is that, man? I mean,
yeah, that's like telling a 7-year-old girl she can't sell her lemonade in the stand.
Yeah, and then proceeding to body slam her, you know. Jeez.
Unbelievable, huh?
I know that video has gone viral, so most of your listeners have seen it by now, so I know I'm not telling you anything new. It's just one thing after the other. That's why it's important that we educate people with the proper critical thinking skills and the proper, you know, ability to see through just blatant disregard for natural law as opposed to man-made law, which is totally contrived and absolute BS, if you ask me. There's a difference between harming somebody or their property and so forth, and dancing on a public square and somehow that being against the law. Harming somebody, okay, if these people were to be dancing on somebody or, you know, going after them, then I can understand. That's natural law, right? But these people dancing, being illegal, and then proceeding to be tased or body slammed or whatever happened, you know, it's crazy. It's
You mentioned natural law versus man-made law. This reminds me very much of William Roberts. You know him?
Sure, be vocal local, right?
Become vocal local, yeah.
Yeah, on Oracle Broadcasting as well. I also do my show on Oracle 5 days a week. So he starts the day off right with his use of critical thinking, and he's been getting into the Trivium as well lately. I don't know if you know that.
Well, I follow as much as possible of his radio, and he is specialized in Agenda 21, but also he introduced me to what is logical positivism. Have you ever heard of that?
No, tell me about it.
No, not logical. I'm confusing terms. Legal positivism.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Have you ever heard of that?
That rings a bell. Tell me more.
Well, tell me more, he says. It's the legal positivist way is like the law is whatever the prince says it is. That's a quote from William. And it goes, of course, against natural law. And he really means the princess and a queen, you know, our queen. If she says, I have to go, then it's bye-bye, Walter, you know. That's legal. The legal law is with you give permission, you know, or you have to go to the government if you want a building permit. Okay, that is all the coming from the legal positivists' idea that sprouted via this philosopher called Auguste Comte. Have you ever heard of him?
No.
Okay, you should dig into him. He also will interest you. Auguste Comte, 10K in the chat. Could you please provide listeners with a link to Auguste Comte? Thank you very much.
You're not talking about Emmanuel Comte.
No.
Maybe that's his brother or his cousin.
I don't know.
You know. And it's funny because I study philosophy, but at the same time, I do a show that's very much about current events and the system of control and all the evils in the world. And as always, solutions. You know, even more importantly, at the same time that I study philosophy, I also study gardening and heirloom seeds and pragmatic things. So it's fascinating, all the connections and the things that we take for granted that you look a little bit deeper into, like what we're going to be talking about today, which is learning. Learning is very important. I had to learn how to learn. And I had to reteach myself, although we have certain skills intuitively in how we learn, we still need to take a look at, exactly how we gather that information and, more importantly, how we process it. And we'll get into that when we talk about the second part of the trivium, which is logic, formal logic.
We got here, I got the trivium period method, pertains to mind, the elementary 3. It's 1, general grammar, 2, formal logic, 3, classical rhetoric. And a question from the chat I had before the show even started was, why does it have to be in that order? General grammar, formal logic, and classical rhetoric.
Well, that's the perfect time to ask that question. And the reason is this. We start off with the pieces. Like with any crime scene investigation, we have to look at what's at the crime scene. What exactly are the pieces that make up the puzzle, or whatever you will. So that's why we start with grammar, okay? Because in order for us to process things through, logic and process it through with understanding and whatnot, we have to first establish that it exists. I mean, it makes perfect sense if you think about it. So you start with grammar. You start with collecting it. And we collect things through 2 different ways. There's special grammar and general grammar. Special grammar consists of properly relates words to other words within a specified language like English, Russian, or Latin. That's special grammar, okay? So we're speaking English right now. If I was a linguist, perhaps we would be speaking your native language, and so forth. And that
But do you mean like, I'll give an example, properly relates words to other words? Does this mean that if I make a sentence that John is playing basketball, that the word is has a relationship to John? Is that what is special grammar?
No, it just means those words are of the same language. It's not necessarily the words, how they interact with one another, but if those words, think about it, if I was to say, because I know a little bit of Spanish, John, ¿cómo está? Well, maybe that's not the, well, you see what I'm saying. If we were to use different languages, that wouldn't work the same. The is
I get it, yeah.
So that's just the special, but when we get into the more specifics, we have special grammar, and then we have general grammar, which relates words to objective reality in any language and applies to all subjects as the first set of building blocks to integrated or fully mindful objective knowledge, a body of knowledge which has been gathered and arranged under the rules of general grammar can now be subject to logic for full understanding, which emphatically is a separate intellectual procedure. So, again, you have to collect this information first in order to then process it. Discovering and ordering facts of reality comprise basic, systematic knowledge.
I'm your host, Walter, and I have Bob Tuskin still with me. We were talking about grammar. Another thing that comes with grammar is phonetics, how you sound. And that ties into etymology. Is that how you pronounce it? Etymology?
Geez, you're asking the wrong guy. I can hardly pronounce my name sometimes. Yeah, but
English is not in my language, so I sometimes have difficulty.
And you know what? It is my language, Walter, but yes, I can still mess it up on a daily basis, and if you tune into my show, you'll know that I do that often. But taking a look at what I was saying, just, grammar, we start, and going back to the question, why this order, why general grammar,
sure.
Formal logic, classical rhetoric, it's because we start off with discovering and ordering facts of reality, think about this, facts of reality, and comprise basic systematic knowledge through grammar. Not only the rules developed and applied to the ordering of words or concept for verbal expression and communication, but our first contact with conscious order as such. This is the initial self-conscious technique used in properly organizing a body of knowledge from raw factual data for the purpose of gaining understanding, which is the next part, through logic, and thus also organizing the individual human mind. It is the foundation upon which all other, quote, methods of organization and order are built. So that's why it starts with grammar, and that's why it's important that we look at grammar. And believe me, I'm the worst when it comes to grammar. And it's not just periods. Grammar is a little bit deeper. Like you were saying, it's how we learned how to read. Whether you learned through phonics, through sounding out the words, or through pictographs, which is whole word association with pictures. It's and I don't know that's the right technical term I was looking for. Pictographs might not be it, so don't quote me on that. But there's a difference in how we process things, and you have to learn how you learn. It's an interesting process. The next part, which is probably the most important part of this all, is logic. And that answers the why of a subject, okay? And we can look at, again, who, what, where, and when, but then we have to answer why, okay? And we have to see if this makes sense. We have to see if it passes the litmus test. Okay. Otherwise, we're just being programmed blindly with just information. Think about it. If you didn't have the mechanism of logic, anything that you got coming through your brain through grammar and gathering of information would just be accepted as truth unto itself. And it's important that we have logic, but in order to have logic applied to the right sort of thing, you have to have the skills first and foremost as an agnostic thinker, somebody who's able to entertain a thought without accepting it, but not necessarily discounting it altogether. In other words, you have to be open-minded, but an open mind that doesn't have the skills of logic and reasoning is a programmable mind. So think of it as a computer, okay? And the information comes into the computer, and then the computer can, through its processor, through the logic and the logic understanding of logical fallacies, which we'll get into here, it will then compute or not compute, okay? And our minds work in a similar fashion. And unfortunately, people's logic function in their brain has been so damaged and so diluted. That's why we get idiocracy. That's why we get, people buying into these lies, these lies of mass deception. And it's important that we gather these logical fallacies and understand them, even if you are someone who considers themselves to be awake. Because even though I consider myself to be somewhat awake, I still am so much better off because of an understanding of these things, because it's not necessarily for my own use all the time. Sometimes understanding logical fallacies are great because your skeptics, your haters, if you will, for lack of a better term, they need to be shown what they're thinking, why their thinking is damaged, or why their thinking doesn't fit. Okay.
Could you explain the difference between deductive and inductive reasoning?
Deductive reasoning. Okay, we take a look at two different types of reasoning. Okay, and it's important to look at deductive versus inductive. This is a part of the trivium. Did I just call it the trivium? It's the trivium. And I'm trying to find my notes here on deductive versus inductive.
Okay, take your time. It's no problem.
I want to get back to that in just a second. But first, I wanted to finish my thought on the logical fallacies and how we can use that to show people. and then the deductive versus inductive is next. Okay, but developing the faculty of reason in establishing valid, i.e. non-contradictory relationships among facts yields basic systematic understanding. It is a guide for thinking correctly, thinking without contradiction. So if something contradicts in your mind, it should raise a red flag. You should say, well, this can't be so, because if A equals A, then B can't be, well, let me see. Let me come up with a better example than that. I wish I had all my examples in front of me. But
don't worry about it.
It's important that we understand when there's a contradiction that comes up. Here's a contradiction.
You should be able to recognize them.
Sure, here's a contradiction. We'll take a look at Building 7. It's a contradiction to think that building just instantaneously decided to blow up in about 7 seconds or so because of the collapse of those other buildings. That's a contradiction, because in my mind, the fact that this amount of mass, according to the laws of physics, doesn't just fall into its own footprint without the aid of something much harsh, rather than just fires or whatever the NIST report and pancake theory, whatever that was. So that's an example of perhaps a contradiction that comes up in your mind. The most common logical fallacies that we see, and there's a lot of them, but the ones we see most commonly are ad hominem fallacies. We see all the time an appeal to authority fallacy, an appeal to belief fallacy, appeal to emotion, appeal to fear. The fallacies, after a while, once you start to notice them, you'll see that they pop up everywhere. They pop up in the mainstream media like you would not believe. It's just nonstop logical fallacies, one after the other. Okay.
Appeals, you named them a couple. Could you name them again?
This is Micro 1650 AM and the Orion Talk Radio Network. You're listening to Walter on Solvener Radio. Did I get that right? Solvener?
Yeah.
All right, solvenerradio.com. And we're talking with Bob Tuskin. And before we continue, I'd like to make a disclaimer that I, Bob Tuskin, do not claim to be, although I do aspire to be, an expert on the trivium and any of the stuff that we're talking about. It sounds good. It may make me look smart, but really I'm just a student like you guys. And both Walter and myself shared an interest in this. He invited me to come on, and I'm glad to go over it. I'm learning as much as possible about it because, again, I think with these skills of the trivium, you can really equip yourself to not buy any of the programming, to not be sold any of the programming. And it's important that we have our skills nice and, refined and ready to go, because there's all sorts of disinfo that we face on a regular basis. We see disinfo after disinfo after distraction, and it's important that we have these skills, because with what I do, I do a talk radio show. Like Walter, I do a show, and we have different guests on all the time. Okay, and as my job as a talk show host is to try to call them out on their BS if I see it, and I try to as much as possible. Although there's just too much to keep up with. That's why, again, you have to be a free thinker, an agnostic thinker, and not just discount something right away, but at the same time, don't accept it fully. And that's what I try to do with my show. Walter, where do you want to pick up from here?
Yeah, we were going through the fallacies, and I was asking you to repeat the kinds of appeals. You had appeal to fear, appeal to authority, appeal to nature is one, I guess. What else do we have?
There's an appeal to belief, which is important.
Ah, yes, yeah.
An appeal to belief is a fallacy that has this general pattern. Most people believe that a claim X is true. Therefore, X is true. Because most people think that some hijackers with box cutters took down these buildings, well, that makes it true. Are you buying that?
Yeah, I'm following it. It's a reality that is created because there is a consensus about it.
Uh-huh. So most people think that we went to the moon or whatever. So therefore, we went to the moon is true. And I'm not saying that we didn't go to the moon.
Oh, I am.
Yeah. And nor am I not saying that we did, for that matter.
Yeah.
But to say that it is incorrect that we didn't go to the moon because simply most people think that we did, that's an appeal to belief.
Yeah.
So, and that's another common one. We see that all the time. Okay, we see an appeal to pity. You know, that's an interesting one. P is presented with the intent to create pity. Therefore, claim C is true. You know, in other words, this is something that makes you feel guilty. And therefore, because it makes you feel bad, it's true. Never mind the information into itself. That's how the appeal to fear works. Okay, Y is presented with a claim that is intended to produce fear. Therefore, claim X is true, and a claim that is generally but need not be related to Y in some manner. So because it's related to Y, claim X is true. In other words, an example of an appeal to fear. You know Professor Smith, and this is one that I'm reading from the Logical Fallacy website that I quote from often. I'll post it in the chat. It's kind of a long URL. But he says, you know, Professor Smith, I really need to get an A in this class. I like to stop by during your office hours later to discuss my grade. I'll be in your building anyways, visiting my father. He's your dean, by the way. I'll see you later. Okay? Or I don't think in other words, the fear of going there, he associated this stuff of fear in there. And therefore he claims that he's going to meet with the professor. I don't think a Red Ryder BB rifle would make a good presentation for you. They are very dangerous and you'll put your eye out. Now, don't you agree that you should think of another gift idea? So because of the fear of poking your eye out, therefore, you should not get this as a gift. When one has nothing to do with the other, okay? As you know, with the gun laws and with guns in general, people kill people. Guns don't kill people. So the fact that a gun is dangerous and has fear associated with it doesn't necessarily mean that we should take away guns because, again, people kill people.
Yeah.
So that's an example of fear. And when you see the fear all the time being used with this war on terror, the war on drugs, there's a constant manipulation of fear. And as we know, it's a very healthy motivator for people. People are controlled by fear when they should be controlled by love.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted the people to hear is the difference between deductive and inductive reasoning.
Yeah, deductive reasoning works from the more general to the more specific. Sometimes this is informally called a top-down approach. We might begin with thinking up a theory about our topic of interest. When then narrow down the more specific hypothesis that we test, we narrow down even further, then we collect observations to address the hypothesis. Then ultimately it leads us to be able to test the hypothesis with specific data. And so in other words, again, it's deductive reasoning works from the more general to the more specific. Inductive works the other way around, okay? Moving from the more specific observations to broader generalizations and theories, informally was sometimes called the button-up approach, okay? And we see the use of deductive versus inductive reasoning with a lot of these examples, 9/11 being one. And again, this is why these skills are important to understand, okay? Because we see a blatant disregard for taking a look at the specifics. We take a look at these general theories, these conspiracy theories that some Muslim hijackers took down these buildings, rather than taking a look at the evidence of controlled demolition, the evidence, even if it's not controlled demolition, the evidence of whatever, okay, rather than taking a look at the specific aspects of the collapse. Of course, the NIST report starts before the, or excuse me, how did that work? It started after the collapse, right?
Well, it actually only tries to explain the initial fall, but then fails to address the resistance of the enormous amounts of 47 core columns there.
Exactly. So, that's a perfect example. Okay.
Yeah.
And
inductive reasoning, if I understand correctly, because I'm a noob philosopher myself, and I work with axiom. One axiom, try to keep it at one, and build from there. So that's inductive?
Yeah, inductive is exactly. You start with the reasoning of something specific, and then you go from there.
Yeah.
Okay. And
that's a dangerous path. Sorry?
Yeah. That's the improper way to do it.
Yeah. This last segment, Bob, we're going to, if you don't mind, go through one or two fallacies, logical fallacies. There's informal and formal fallacy. Is there a big difference between the two?
An informal versus a formal fallacy?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I know the difference between an informal and a formal fallacy offhand. I think there's formal logic. And versus informal logic, and that's just a systematic understanding versus just basic logic in your everyday life. Here's what the Trivium Education website says about logic. It says it's developing the faculty of reason in establishing valid, i.e. non-contradictory relationships among facts that yields basic systematic understanding. That's formal logic. And that's what consists of the logical fallacies that we've been discussing. And then the last part of the trivium, which I'll mention after we go over just a few more logical fallacies briefly, is rhetoric. And that's what we're doing right now. That's the stage of actually being an activist. And then something we won't get into today is the quadrivium, which is arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And that's something that is also a part of this subject matter. And this is a liberal arts education. Of course, the word liberal has got this negative connotation behind it nowadays, but all it means is to be free or free-minded. And this was taught, this sort of education, at some point, and has been now removed from our education system, our Pavlovian, brainwash, compulsory education system that we talk about, and is important when you're talking about the trivium to understand that the conditioning camps, otherwise known as schools, don't teach people this. But amongst the powers that shouldn't be and the elite pedophiles, they know this stuff, and they learn about the trivium and whatnot, so they know how to deceive us. They know that we can't see through their different fallacies, understand when there is an ad hominem fallacy. Okay, an ad hominem fallacy is so common. Person A makes claim X. Person B makes an attack on person A. Therefore, A's claim is false. Because I attack you, your claim that water is H2O is now incorrect. But what does me attacking you have anything to do with water unto itself? We see this. We see a constant shooting of the messenger. okay, going after the messenger rather than the information unto itself. I'm sure you've heard that. You know, don't shoot me, I'm just the messenger, okay?
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, and that's a part of this culture of personality and celebrities, you know, and just this blatant disregard for information unto itself. So whenever possible, please try to remove the person from the information.
Yeah.
It's hard to do, you know, and I'm not saying that we don't at times say, well, that, you know, that's person saying this, therefore it should alter my perception, and it does, whether we like it or not sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But the more you remove yourself from that habit that the masses are trained to go for, which is to go after the messenger, and you know, this ad hominem fallacy again is one of the major fallacies that I'd like to highlight because it's just so prevalent, so prevalent in the media. You'll see the media consist a lot of mostly ad hominem fallacies, okay, as well as the appeal to fear and appeal to authority. So it's just important for people to get these logical fallacies in order and understand logic. And there's different aspects of logic rather than just the logical fallacies that we probably won't have time to get into. But it's important that people look at why. You know, why is this taking place? What we have the what, like we talked about, and this goes back to the order. Then we have the why, and the last part of it is the how, and that's rhetoric.
As a philosopher, I got this rule learned to me by a friend philosopher, and he said, if you are thinking about a concept and you think you understood it and you're trying to explain it to someone else, but you fail to explain it
again. Yeah, exactly.
Then you don't understand it.
Then you don't understand it. Yeah, and I see myself doing that all the time. Like this show, for instance, you know, you know, it's funny how that works. If you can't repeat the information unto yourself, then you don't own that information. And it's cool though, because once you own the information, it's there. You own it. So the last part is extremely important. It's applying knowledge and understanding, and expressively comprises of wisdom, or in other words, it's the systematically usable knowledge and understanding. So you then have this knowledge and understanding, and you use it. That's what wisdom is. That's what philosophy is. Philosophy literally means the love of wisdom, okay? And that's the last stage, the stage of giving and becoming the person that then is able to share that information and promote it. And that's what we do as an activist all the time. Many of the listeners do this. You know, they learn something on the show, they hear something on your show, they then know that information, and maybe they don't get it at first. Maybe they have to go back and do some more research or listen to the show again. But after a while, they start to own that information. And owning that information without actually acting on that information and doing something about it, and that's why I do a show, and I'm sure you do a show as well, is kind of, you know, there comes a point where silence becomes betrayal.
Yes. Yep. So, I said that when I started making radio on Orion Talk Radio, that one of the main reasons is that I would consider myself a traitor if I were to shut up. Yeah. Yeah,
that's the worst thing is this apathy, you know, and that's a part of the conditioning is that, oh, this information is too great, you know, I hear this is a common logical fallacy I hear all the time. Oh, we will never know what really happened with 9/11. Therefore, who cares about looking at it? You know, because somehow they, you know, the defeatist attitude, we'll never really know. Therefore, well, we shouldn't look at what we do know because we'll never really know. Have you guys? I'm sure you've heard that same thing before. Everyone.
Yeah, I get.
We'll never
I get
know.
The idea.
Hey,
Bob,
people say that. Yes.
We're running up against the end of the radio.
Cool.
And I wanted to mention your site, bobtuskin.com. What can people find there?
They can find everything, including my show. And I'm going to start posting much more articles. We just kind of post articles about the show and for now, but we're going to have it with daily updates, and they have the whole archives there that are itemized with the various guests. And thanks a lot for having me on. I appreciate what you're doing, Walter, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Yeah, well, if you don't mind, I'm going to send you another invitation in 3 months or 6 months or so, because I'd like to continue this, if you don't mind.
Sure, whenever you want. You just say the day.
Ah, that's cool. So, I want to thank all the listeners for listening, and thank Bob for coming on. I found this very interesting, and it reminds me of William Roberts again. I also had him on my show, and we talked about time and space and things like that. And it also ties in a bit with what we talked about. And so this is the end about of my show called Solvino Radio. You can listen to the rest of the people that are coming on the show. Maggie is next for an hour. Then is Jimmy X. And then comes Jinx, I believe. And then there's Popeye, I think. And then there's Question 46. I'm doing this all out of my head. Well, I'm getting to know them. So check out the rest of the radio of Orion Talk Radio. Check out the website, micro1650am.com. And I hope to talk to you guys next week when I will be back with, I don't know what I'll be discussing. Maybe something else than mythology